Sandy Wyllie. Today I'm going to dive into my 2-year torrid affair with my psychologist, Dr. James Barbaria. And I wrote it in this book, Love Outside the Boundaries. This is a painting, but that's exactly how Jim looked. He had a six-pack. He had jet black velvet hair, trimmed beard, ripping muscles. Now, he died at 62. He'd be turning over in his grave if he knew about the things that I put in this book. Because it's unethical. It's also illegal in half the states in the U.S. for psychologists to have sex with their patient. Not only did he sexually abuse me, because I can't give consent because I'm a patient and he's a doctor, but he verbally abused me, emotionally abused me, and physically abused me. One time he kept me hostage. He kept me hostage in his house. I wanted to leave and he would not let me leave. I tried to run out the door and he blocked it. I went to the other door because there were several doors. There was the front door, the back door, downstairs in his office was a door, and he would chase me and push me away from the door. And when I threatened him that I'd go to the licensing board, I barely made it out onto his front porch. He picked me up, physically picked me up, and shoved me on the couch and started shaking, violently shaking me and spitting in my face. He'd always swear at me in public, say, F you, F you. You're responsible for all my patients. If I lose my license, you're responsible for whatever happens to my patients. You're responsible. This is what he would say. Now, let me tell you, it did not start out that way. It's important for me to get this story across because this is not like, I'm not the only patient that has been severely abused by her doctor, by her psychologist. There are many out there, but they don't talk about it. Not only have I talked about it on these videos, but I have written many books, and this is just one of them about that relationship. Now, in the beginning, he wasn't like that at all. In the beginning, he was very, very handsome. I mean, he looked 20 years younger. He did not look his age. He, like I said, he had thick black, like satinous hair, and big bulging muscles and a six-pack. I mean, he was lean. And he had this like megawatt smile, and he would extend my sessions and tell me how special, be careful of that word, how special I was, how beautiful I was gorgeous, and I was intelligent. And then he started opening up more about his personal life to me and told me about his ex-girlfriends, and he told me about his childhood, how his father would beat him up. One time his father almost killed him severely. He told him, he was a little boy, he told him, take all your clothes off, lie down, face in the bed, and then he took like a big stick and beat him until his whole back was like completely bleeding and covered in welts. And Jim was praying in his pillow that he wouldn't die. He was praying to God, because he was raised Catholic. He was praying to God, God, please don't make me die, while his father was severely beating him. So he opened up about this with me while I was his patient. So it was like a role reversal, okay? I was listening to all of his problems instead of him listening to my problems the way it's supposed to be. But he was very charming through all of this. I felt very honored. I felt very special. I felt like I also felt responsible for him because he was, divulging all this like intimate parts of his life to me, and I felt like, I felt responsible because he was doing that. I felt I needed to protect him. I felt I needed to protect him instead of him protecting me. And then we got to so he slowly told me more and more and more about his personal life, which is never supposed to happen in therapy. So it was a role reversal. Then we started getting physical, and I don't mean sexual at first. We started holding each other, and he would hold me in his arms, press me up against his body, and I can breathe in, like he had this like musky smell, like, I don't know how to describe it, like being out in the woods, like when animals leave their scent, it was like hormonal. It was like pheromones. Ever hear of pheromones? It was like that, like pheromones. Very, potent. And he would like rock me in his arms, so we would be like, it reminded me of that song, slow dancing, sway into the music. Or it also reminded me of, like, when a baby wakes up crying in the middle of the night, and you take them in your arms and you try to rock them like this in your arms till they fall asleep in your arms. Well, it was like that too. It was both like slow dancing with your romantic partner, and also like I was his baby and he was taking me in his arms, cradling me, and like rocking me like that. And he would never want me to leave upset. If I left a session upset, he would call me back and say, look, I really feel bad that you left upset. Will you please come back, and you don't have to pay? And over time, I paid him less and less and less the more we got personal with each other. And then we started kissing, just, little pecks at first, And then Black Friday happened. And I don't want to get into all of it because I want you to read it in the book. But what happened on Black Friday, it was Black Friday of the year 2013. So it was the end of November on a Friday. They have all those sales at the stores. And I was, it was in the evening after 7 o'clock, and it was cold, dark, and in the winter time. It was, it gets really dark at that time in the winter. And I had my pajamas on, and he calls, and he called me, and we started talking. He goes, you know what? This is very difficult to talk about on the phone. I don't know what we were talking about, but he said, why don't you come over? And I said, now? It's after 7 o'clock, on a weekday. I'm in my pajamas. So he said, I really need you to come over. I can't really talk about this on the phone. Well, I should have said, wait till our next session to talk about it, right? That's what anyone would, say. But instead, I jumped up, put my overcoat on, didn't even get dressed. My husband and son were sitting there like, where are you going? I said, my shrink wants to see me. At this time? Do you have to go now? They couldn't understand. They thought something was really going on. I mean, to call a patient up, in the evening after office hours. So I didn't even get dressed. I just had my nightgown on, threw an overcoat on, went in the car, because he only lived 10 minutes away from me in Jamaica Plain. And got there. He took me in his office, and he had this really dim light on. It looked really romantic. And we just fell into each other's arms. And, then he pulled my body. He went over to the rocking chair. he took me and pulled me into his lap. And then he stuck his tongue down inside my mouth and started French kissing me. So I guess there wasn't much talk, right? He said I had to come over right away to talk to him. There wasn't much talk now, was there? We were kissing, and I was still his patient. And shortly after that, I told him, I'm not going to keep paying you so I can listen to your problems, and you can, we can stop making out during the therapy session, which is never supposed to happen. And so that's when we began a dating relationship that lasted 2 years. Two years of dating. We even went to couples therapy with Dr. Richard Geis. He was seeing my other psychologist, Dr. Richard Geis, for his own therapy. So I was seeing Dr. Geis for individual therapy. He was seeing Dr. Geis for individual therapy. And me and Jim both were going to Dr. Geis for couples therapy. Not only that, but I was also going to Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang for individual therapy. And I also brought Jim to Dr. Fortgang for couples therapy. I mean, it just gets crazy. I did a video on this before, and during those times, Jim was completely narcissistic when I was dating him. Completely. I mean, we had intercourse, but he just laid back on the couch. I don't know if I can say this on YouTube. And let me go down on him. Okay? All the time. Because there's no effort there, right? The man just sits back and enjoys oral sex. He doesn't have to do anything except sit back and enjoy it. But with intercourse, then it's different, right? With that, the man does have to do something. So he didn't so much like that when we did that, but he welcomed me performing orally on him because he was selfish, he was self-centered, and all he cared about was himself. And in this book, I write all that, how I listened to all of his problems, how even sexually he was selfish, because most of the time it was me performing orally on him, not him on me, very infrequently, and not mutual intercourse where both people are pleasing each other, where both people are joined together, right? It was more a one-sided sex. Same with, I'm listening to all his problems, a one-sided. He was narcissistic. No one knew about it. No one knew outside of Dr. Richard Geis and Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang, and they didn't do anything, and my husband and son. None of his friends, none of his patients, none of his colleagues knew, how he really was, or that he was having an adulterous affair with a borderline patient. None of them ever dreamed he would be like that, because he worked with priests. Can you believe that? He worked with priests and nuns. He had priests and nuns as patients, as his patients, and they thought very highly of him. He was supposedly a devout Catholic, and he had all these priests and nuns that saw him for therapy. And they even had him write a paper and give a speech to a group of priests at this parish. They thought very highly of him. They had no idea that was all a facade, that behind in private, he was carrying on an immoral, unethical, adulterous affair with a married patient. None of them had any idea. None of his colleagues, none of his friends. He didn't tell any of his friends, none of his colleagues. None of his patients knew this. No one really knew how he was. And even though he had that megawatt smile with his patients, and he always cracked jokes, and they thought he was great, in reality, he was very moody. When he used to come to pick me up every Saturday in his black convertible sports car, a Honda S2000, shiny black convertible with the hood down, and he put his foot to the pedal to the metal, let me tell you. He would always pick me up, and he'd always be moody. He would just like I'd say, "How you doing?" "I'm tired." That's the greeting I got every Saturday night. And he picked me up in front of my house so that my husband, imagine the gall that this man has, driving up to my house where my husband and son can see him in the sports car outside the window. And I was like sucked up in this vortex, in this whirlwind, I was sucked up in it all, I was like, because before Jim, I had, I'd been with my husband. We were both virgins when we got married. And one other man, Randy, for a few months, I think 5 months. And, I never had sex with anyone else other than my husband and Randy. So, and my husband and Randy were not, they weren't like Jim. Jim could have been a model. He was that handsome. And he was so fit. He had a six-pack. And he was a doctor. Dr. James Barberi. He had the PhD on the wall. And he owned a $500,000 condo in Jamaica Plain. Huge condo. And it had, would it have 3 bathrooms? No, 4. One off the master bedroom, one in between the bedrooms upstairs. That's 2 upstairs, one on the second level, and one where his patient's office, where his office were. So he had 4 bathrooms in his house. 4 bathrooms. And it was a huge condo. And he drove a sports car, and, I was just sucked up in all that, He was very charming. He knew everything, how to make the moves and everything. And I, on the other hand, was very inexperienced. I hadn't been with men. Like I said, I married my first boyfriend. I met him at a community college, and then I had a relationship with one other man, Randy, for 5 months. And that was it. That was my experience, That was the limits of my experience with men. So when this doctor, who was like he stepped out of Vogue or GQ, comes after me, and it was just, overwhelming. And I have it all here in the book. And I just want to, it's very easy for a woman to get swept up in that kind of thing. But when you're a psychologist, who's supposed to be there to help you, not to dump their problems on you, not to sexually take advantage of you, especially selfishly, letting you please him all the time, and once in a while it's mutual. And not, treat you like dirt, under his feet, telling you how you're responsible, telling me I'm responsible for his patients. That, if I go to the board and report him, I'll be the one that hurts all his patients. And that's not true at all. And it just took a lot of time and effort to write this book and tell my story, so other women will be, it mostly happens to women, but it does happen to some men. Some female psychologists are predators, And I've read stories about that too. I'm not trying to say it's all older male psychologists, and he was 11 years older than me. 11 years, but he didn't look at me. It's not always men that are the predators. Women can be too. But, you know, I just want to get the message out, and I want people to read my story and know, like, you know, it took a long, long time because I felt so much shame and so much guilt, and I felt responsible for his patients. I felt responsible for him, and that's why it took me so long to actually, you know, report him to the licensing board and, you know, get a lawyer and go after him legally and win and get compensation. And now I'm going after Dr. Richard Geist, the psychologist that saw us for couples therapy and also saw Jim. And the funny thing is, well, it's not funny, but the ironic thing is, he saw in the beginning, he would see Jim during my sessions. So I would give my sessions to Jim. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine giving your sessions away to your boyfriend? So you don't, and your boyfriend's your psychologist, your second psychologist, so that you're not going to your sessions, your boyfriend's going instead of you, in place of you. That's what was happening. He was going to my sessions instead of me, and he's my other psychologist. It's just crazy, crazy, crazy making.